Hey everybody. All right, we are back with another Lucasfilm Star Wars discussion with a very special guest returning, Dre, and you might know him on Twitter as @VashSky. Welcome to the show again, Dre.
Hey there, how's it going? Good to be here. Let's get started.
It's good to have you back. So let's talk about Lucasfilm. There's a lot going on right now with Lucasfilm, and a few days ago, I think it was like last week, it was announced that Benioff and Weiss are leaving the upcoming Star Wars trilogy that was supposed to come out like 2022. So they're walking away from the project. What are your thoughts on this?
So many. It's an endless amount of thoughts. I guess my first reaction was, kind of. I don't think I was surprised by it, but it's just kind of like this thing where it's like, oh, more creatives walk out the door of Lucasfilm, and for me, it's a little disheartening. To be honest with you, not due to Benioff and Weiss specifically, but it's just the fact of we have creatives in the door, Lucasfilm's talking to them, and that breaks apart, and that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that. I'm not shedding any tears necessarily that Benioff and Weiss are gone from the project. I'm not a Game of Thrones guy, but it was like almost universally. I mean, season 8 of Game of Thrones was like universally hated by the fans. I mean, pretty much no one liked it. It wasn't even divisive. It was just everyone hated it. And there were a lot of things that they have done kind of trying to run away from that situation, trying to avoid the fans after that whole situation, where I got really turned off by those two. So the fact that they're leaving Star Wars is, in my opinion, not a bad thing. We might even have dodged a bullet. Who knows? But it does speak to the larger problem at Lucasfilm. And, it's Benioff and Weiss. Before it was Lord Miller, Josh Trank, Colin Trevorrow, and I think even, if I'm not mistaken, Michael Arndt was a writer for Force Awakens. He left before Force Awakens, but that was early on. People, I think, forget about that because it was such a long time ago. But there's like a huge list of people walking away. I mean, it's not good. It's not good.
It's not good at all. And like you, I'm not a big Game of Thrones person either. But I like you said, I followed the Game of Thrones season 8 fiasco, and every single fan I spoke to was just like, it was almost like they if they knew how it was going to end up, they didn't want to be fans to begin with, and that shocked me. I mean, I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. So I wasn't shedding over any tears for losing David Benioff and E.B. Weiss because of that whole incident. But looking back, like you described, we've gone through a number of creatives, and in the course of Lucasfilm releasing 4 films up to this point until Rise of Skywalker is released in December, they've gone through about 9 directors.
That's insane.
That's an incredible amount of turnover. And that's only on the Star Wars side. In doing research for this discussion, I found there's even more creatives that have been shown the door on the Indiana Jones side of the Lucasfilm
really
piece. Oh yeah, absolutely. They've had a number of writers come in and attempt to write out Indiana Jones 5, and they've shown them the door. I mean, it is alarming how every single production is fraught with turmoil and disagreement.
It is. And, I've been really supportive of the films on her watch. I've liked every one of them to varying degrees, but in my opinion, there hasn't been a bad film in the bunch yet. And, I'm getting to the point now where I'm thinking like, maybe she should step down. I mean, no other studio under the Disney umbrella has this problem. Pixar makes movies. I mean, they had a few instances here and there, which is normal for every studio, but they're not bleeding directors constantly. Marvel has done 22 films or 23 films under Disney. Same situation. Maybe one or two times a director has gotten swapped out. Out of 22 movies, that's not really that big of a deal. Disney Animation, same situation. They managed to keep the directors on board. All these other studios, and here we are with Star Wars. They're 4 films in, and they've already gone through 9 directors. I mean, that's a serious issue. Now, I have to ask you, like, what do you think it is? What exactly is it? A vetting problem? Is it what exactly is going on here, in your opinion?
I love how you brought this up, because that's kind of what I was going to get into, and as to why maybe this occurred with Star Wars specifically, or Lucasfilm specifically, and hasn't really occurred with Pixar and Marvel. And we got to take a step back, and we kind of have to reevaluate, what went into maybe the Lucasfilm acquisition as opposed to the other acquisitions. Remember, after Roy Disney's Save Disney campaign, Bob Iger's made the CEO effective September 30th, 2005. And at that time, Bob Iger's looking at the situation going, okay, our studio division is not doing well, specifically our animation department. And for him, it's like, we need a big infusion of talent and fast. He wants to turn it around as quickly as possible. And there's a famous story where, he's sitting there and he's watching he's at Hong Kong, watching the parade go by. Disney characters come out, almost no response. The Pixar characters come out, huge response. It's like, okay, we gotta bring Pixar officially into the fold, because at that point they were more of an independent production company with a distribution deal with Disney. And so January 24th, 2006, they strike a deal. Steve Jobs, sells Pixar to Disney. And with that comes just a huge infusion of talent that they can use to spread out across the company in various directions. But remember, I like to use the term turnkey operation, where essentially the production pipeline's in place, full studio, they're producing films, they've already released films. Like I said, turnkey. And that was for about $7.4 billion. Go to August 2009, they buy Marvel. And it's pretty much, it's very similar in a lot of ways. Again, they have a release template. They have a production schedule. They have films in active production, have been already released, set to release. They already had over a $500 million credit deal with Merrill Lynch, I believe, to produce films in succession, have a roadmap, all that stuff, turnkey operation. Not much input from Disney at that point. With both of these, it's just, here's a bag of cash, just give us a bigger one return, do whatever you want, kind of thing.
Wow.
And that really speaks to Bob Iger's management style, and how it differs from Michael Eisner. Michael Eisner was far more autocratic. He would constantly have his fingers in every pot, kind of thing. He wanted his fingerprints everywhere. Bob Iger, he's very much more laissez-faire, and that is to say, hey, get the right people for the right jobs, have them manage and do their own thing, within that department or that division or whatever, and have them run the show. And I won't step in until I absolutely need to. That's kind of been his management style ever since he took over. And it kind of has to, right? Because the Disney company is so big, so broad, you can't manage everything. So in comes Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm hadn't produced a Star Wars film since 2005's Revenge of the Sith. It hadn't been producing films actively for a while. They had been, their technical divisions, ILM, Skywalker Sound, THX, those were doing pretty good. But as far as the movie division, it had been dormant. They hadn't been producing anything for a while. And, they had no production pipeline. They had no release schedule. They weren't even in the business of releasing films at that point. So Bob Iger's kind of forced to get this, production company that is Lucasfilm off the ground and running. appoints Kathleen Kennedy on, with George Lucas's good graces, to helm this, and off we go. And I think in having to get up off the ground, reestablish the franchise into, kind of this modern era, setting out a plan for the films, producing the story group, and producing the production schedule and the production pipeline, reactivating Pinewood. All of that stuff, I think, goes into why this maybe went a little south. And Bob Iger's even come out and said, I believe the Hollywood Reporter, they published the interview saying that, Bob Iger essentially saying, we ran when we should have crawled. We just went too far, too fast. And I think that has a lot to do with it. But as far as evaluating talent, as far as, who is correct for the role, who's correct for the directorial duties, mapping out the timeline, the cinematic franchise, that all kind of has to ride on Kathleen Kennedy's shoulders a little bit there. Yeah. So I do believe she's got something to do with this. Go ahead.
Yeah, she absolutely does. She absolutely does. And that's the thing is that I really do believe Kathleen Kennedy is a brilliant producer. But just because you're a phenomenal player doesn't mean you're a phenomenal coach, so to speak. And so
Absolutely.
She's brilliant in the producing role. Obviously, I mean, her resume is incredible, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she's good at running a studio. So maybe, I mean, I'd even be open to like having her keep her position, but put someone in there that can kind of do this stuff where they're the, like another person that gets in there and vets these directors and vets these writers for her. And maybe that's going to be the role of Michelle Rejwan. I don't really know, but a position like that is really needed, obviously, because this can't continue like this. And it's costly. I'm sure that, Benioff and Weiss leaving, people seem to think that it's like when you and I quit our jobs, we just leave and that's the end of it. When these guys walk away from a project, they got to buy out. Disney has to buy them out of that contract. It costs money. It's not cheap. And Solo, look what happened with that. I mean, Solo probably would have made at least a little bit of a profit had there not have been that director swap out so late in the game, with all the reshoots and everything. So it's cost the company a lot.
It absolutely has. And you got to bring stuff like that up. I mean, even Force Awakens had its issues with writing. I was okay with that. Obviously they had to map out, what has come to be a trilogy, map out a series of films. So I was okay with the constant rewrites. I believe that script, though, was rewritten about 4 times before its release in 2015. But yeah, I mean, Rogue One, you have Tony Gilroy taking over for Gareth Edwards late in the game there. Bunch of reshoots happen there. And Tony Gilroy pretty much edits the film and directs the film himself, which is kind of a little bit unheard of to be like that. Solo, I mean, so much has been said, so much has been documented. Yeah. I don't think we got to go over that, but I mean, 80% of that film in the can, and Ron Howard's got to salvage it in the final hour. I mean, it's insane, and they had to reshoot the majority of that film, which I think doomed it in the end. And think about it. You have to rebuild sets. You got to, get the actors dressed and get those costumes out. And from what I understand, that added upwards of $150 million to the production budget. And at that point, you're already up against it. So you've just got a lot of stuff that's just eye-raising. That's just like, wow. I mean, what is going on here within Lucasfilm?
It really is. It really is. And it's kind of funny. I feel like there's this desire at Lucasfilm to, they want to be bold. They want to take Star Wars in new directions and expand the brand, right? But then I feel like once they actually get into it, they get cold feet and they pull back. You know, they hire these up and coming, fresh new directors, young directors like Lord and Miller. Yeah, come and do our solo movie. They come and do the solo movie, and then, you know, 80% of the way through or whatever, they decide, oh no, it's not working. They get cold feet, right? And it kind of reminds me of Disney animation in the in that transition period between the 9 Old Men era, the old school animators and stuff, and the next generation that ultimately did the Disney Renaissance. And there was a little bit of that conflict where the 9 Old Men generation, they wanted to kind of stay the course. We've always done it this way, play it safe, you know, that kind of thing. But the new generation, the John Lasseters, you know, and that whole new generation coming in wanted to change things up and turn everything on its head and do bold new things for Disney animation. And I feel like that internal struggle is sort of happening right now with Lucasfilm. You know, at one point, some of them want to, some people within Lucasfilm want to go in new directions, want to try new things, want to experiment. And there's like maybe another faction that wants to be more traditionalist and kind of stick to what they've always done. And it's causing a problem, you know? And what do you think about that? I mean, do you think that's there? Are you seeing evidence of that as well, where it's sort of like this push-pull of like, they don't really know as a company how to move forward? Or, you know, do you get that feeling a little bit?
I'm getting the sense of division for sure. And I think that's kind of why these directors and creatives keep walking away. It's like you want to take it in a new direction, but then when somebody has kind of a, you know, a vision or something that conflicts with maybe what Lucasfilm wants, that's really where there's an impasse, and you know, something happens. I do agree with you that I can see how you can make the comparison between the transitional period within Disney after Walt Disney passed away, and what happened within the animation studios at that point, and what management wanted and what the creatives wanted. I can certainly see that. I think looking at it, and you know, oh, this is going to be interesting to say this. I don't think Kathleen Kennedy has a great grasp of what Star Wars is and what it should be going forward. And here's why I say this for you. I know this is kind of a big statement, but I look at interviews with Kathleen Kennedy, and I look at interviews with Kevin Feige. Remember, Kevin Feige, he comes out of being a producer on not just the MCU films, but he produced a lot of the Marvel films released by the various studios. You know, the X-Men films. I believe he produced, you know, Daredevil, and, you know, all the kind of the films that came out before the MCU became real big. And he was always, I mean, he comes at it from a fan standpoint. I mean, he just I love these characters. I know where I would want to take them if I got the chance. And that's what he's seeing when he's producing those other films. If I ever got the chance, I'm going to do things differently. I know what to do to make Marvel as successful as it can be. And so when you see him in interviews and you ask him a question regarding story, regarding character development, depth, lore, he's always got just an amazing answer for you. He reverberates his knowledge to the audience, and it's quite spectacular. I've not seen that from any interview from Kathleen Kennedy, and that makes me a little bit worried. It kind of raises the question: how much does she understand Star Wars? How much does she know about it, and can she make those moves that are required to get Star Wars really where it needs to go going forward? And I believe she puts her trust in different directors and creatives to do that. And I don't know if it's the story group, I don't know if it's her, I don't know if it's other people, but when there's that conflict between, you know, where maybe that creative wants to go with it and them, I think that's where a lot of this division lies.
I kind of get the impression, at least from the outside. I mean, it might be completely different on the ground, but from the outside, I feel like Kathleen Kennedy she's more of a Bob Iger than she is a Kevin Feige. She's sort of like, she would be better in a role where she would kind of oversee things in a general sense, kind of manage and kind of put people in positions to do the on the ground day-to-day stuff. But she's not the Kevin Feige where she's a passionate fan, where she's nerding out like with us, right? Where she wants
Yeah.
It's different, and I think she does care about Star Wars a whole lot. And I do respect, actually, one thing about Kathleen that I do like a lot is the fact that she doesn't care, for better or worse, doesn't care about optics. I mean, 80% through the Solo movie, she doesn't like the way it's done. We're gonna cut the directors, and we're gonna do a whole different, we're gonna do a whole change of course. And I respect that.
I can respect
in a lot of ways. Yeah, because she's putting the quality over the appearance, the PR, the optics, which is a good thing. The issue is happening way too often, but
it's happening.
About her. But she does need to. But I do feel like she's not a Feige where she can, or even a Jon Favreau that really loves the material like a fan does. It's different. She's almost exactly like a Bob Iger. She should be in a role like that where she's kind of delegating more than being part of that creative process, in my opinion.
I think you're right about that, and it's kind of interesting because, and one of the reasons we keep going back to Kevin Feige is obviously it's direct comparison, working on the same company, kind of given the same responsibilities and so forth. But it's interesting because if you look at Kevin Feige, he's slowly been given more responsibilities and duties as time has gone on. Remember, in I believe it was 2015, they had Ike Perlmutter kind of step away from the studio division a little bit, so he can directly correspond with Alan Horn, and now just recently, he's been given direct oversight over, I believe it was Marvel printing and the comics division, I believe animation, TV. So his role has expanded. We haven't really seen that from Kathleen Kennedy in regards to much else going forward. I mean, she's head of the Disney Plus projects, but I mean that's about it. So when I look at Kathleen Kennedy, I think you're right. I think she might. She might have the foresight to make maybe good business judgments, maybe putting people in positions where this is interesting. maybe she's good on the business end, but maybe not on the creative end. And she needs somebody that has creative instincts that can take this to where it needs to go creatively and can help in vetting people before they become, directors and screenwriters and so forth. And because, like you said, there's been a remarkable amount of turnover, and yeah, it is costly to studio resources. It does cost time. Remember, we have a Star Wars film, I believe, on the slate for 2022. Is that correct? And then 2024, then 2026?
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to make that 2022 deadline at this point with so many people that have walked out. So I think you need somebody in there, just a voice in the room that's saying, hey, we should go with this guy or this gal or whoever. We should go with this person for this and this reasons to bring this vision to light. And until we get that in place, I think we're going to still see this turnover.
Yeah, I think the best approach for Lucasfilm, because I do like Kathleen Kennedy, and I do have to reiterate, I do think she's a brilliant producer, but I think that for what she brings to the table, I think Lucasfilm really needs it should be like a 2-person executive team, and maybe have Kathleen overseeing the general the general, and then having like a Jon Favreau come in and he does more of the managing of the creative and then does all the vetting of the directors and stuff like that. Maybe approach like that, because a Kevin Feige is a rare find, right? I mean, he's not easy to come by. So maybe Lucasfilm can do it a little differently. Maybe they can have a two-prong approach or something like that. That would be kind of interesting. You did touch upon an interesting point about making that 2022 deadline. Do you think, because Benioff and Weiss have left the project, do you think that we're going to see those movies being ever come to fruition? Or do you think that with them leaving, that kind of signals that maybe those movies are going to get canned altogether? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, if you can't meet your release schedule, I don't know if those movies get canned because you can't meet your release schedule. They just get pushed down the line. So, they're not going to let that release window fall through. They're going to probably, I mean, if they can't make the 2022 deadline, they will probably slot in another film to take that spot so that they don't lose it to another studio. But that's the fear, right? That's you don't want to fall behind and not make your release window, because it's kind of an indictment on your entire studio if you don't do that. And to be honest, I mean, I've looked at the history, like I said, of Indiana Jones, and think about it. This thing's announced March 2016 for a release date July 19, 2019. That obviously didn't take place. 2017 rolls around. The release dates changed to July 10th, 2020. Photography is scheduled to take place in 2019. That doesn't take place either. Early 2018, Lucasfilm approached screenwriters Scott Beck and Brian Woods from A Quiet Place. They eventually walk. June 2018, Jonathan Kasdan replaces David Koepp as the screenwriter, and that film would miss its release mid-2020 release date. Indiana Jones 5. Release date pushed back again to July 9th, 2021. Let's hope it comes out. But then, Kasdan's script, which was written from scratch, replaced entirely by Dan Fogelman with an entirely different premise, so more turnover. Principal photography is scheduled for April 2020. We'll see. And then David Koepp says he's writing again for the project, and that they are, they're still trying, and that they had got a good idea this time. So, yay! But again, Harrison Ford is 77 years old today. If it comes out in 2021, he's going to be 79, because it's going to come out 4 days before his birthday, so 79 effectively. So these things, you gotta hit them. You gotta get them out, and you gotta be on schedule. You have to have the foundations in place to make these things run as smoothly as possible. So when I think of Star Wars and I think of that 2022 date, I'm like, based on history, I don't know. I don't know if they hit that date. Even with Solo, they wanted the release date of Mary Poppins Returns. They said, we had to, reshoot this thing, obviously, give us more time. Let's release this in December. From what I understand, they were denied flat out. Just, hey, we got to release this film on time. And so this is why it's so crucial. You got to get your foundations right before you build that house on it. And it just makes me extremely concerned going forward on the studio front, just in general. Is the current management structure in place to make that move to put every single film coming out in prime position? If you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they've released 23 films, and I looked at it, and every single, if you divide those up by characters and by saga, so the Avengers saga, every single one has made more money than its previous. So Iron Man 2 made more money than Iron Man 1. Iron Man 3 made more money than Iron Man 2. Same thing with Thor, same thing with Captain America, same thing with Ant-Man. Every single one has made more money. Every single phase has made more money. The exception being Avengers: Age of Ultron. It made a little bit less money than the original Avengers, but they've made more money. They are steadily growing. They are steadily on a path to success. Hopefully, this bucks the trend with Rise of Skywalker. But if you do that same thing with Star Wars, every film has made less than its predecessor, and it's on the downward decline. So I think when they looked at D&D, they said, okay, well, we got to get this. If we're going to do a new trilogy, we got to get it right. And so they may have looked at Game of Thrones and the reception and said, maybe we should rethink this. But the larger implication of all of this, like you said, is the reputation for Lucasfilm when it comes to creatives. And that reputation spreads in Hollywood. A lot of these guys go to the same parties. You know, they run the same circles. And word spreads, hey, it's kind of difficult over there in Lucasfilm. So if you take that job, just know, you know, that kind of stuff. And so when all these creatives go out the door and they have their experiences,
yeah,
you know, that only leads to bad things. And right now, content is king. You've got Apple Plus coming up. You've got, you know, Netflix is you know, they were the ones that stole D&D for $250 million production budget or whatever. You have, you know, I believe it's, what is it called, Peacock from NBC.
yeah,
You know, CBS. Everybody has a streaming service. Everybody has these, you know, these production companies now, and you have to face all of that. And creatives are going to be, you know, they're going to be hard to come by when you have all of these different, you know, things going on around you. So again, this has far larger implications than just two people that maybe had a bad season walk out the door. This can get really bad really fast, especially in the era where, like I said, content is king.
yeah. And no, you're absolutely correct. And the thing is like we're getting to a point now where, like you said, the creatives are going to be thinking like, well, do I really want to work for Lucasfilm? Because, you know, these guys, I mean, who wants to get involved with a studio where there's a good chance, I mean, there's a good chance that you're going to have to walk away from a project. And it's kind of embarrassing, I mean, for anybody. I mean, when you're attached to a project and then you have to walk away from it, a lot of these directors might say, hey, you know what, I don't want to put my name through all that, you know, I'd rather not bother. Why would I do that? Why would I throw my hat in a ring and then, you know, have to have the PR drama of having to walk away or whatever it is. And unfortunately, I mean, that happening based on history is pretty likely. I mean, it's not even like a maybe. I mean, it's pretty likely considering the history. So that's a huge problem for Lucasfilm. I wanted to ask you, what is it? What do you think in your summation? In you know, based on what you know, why hasn't Bob Iger replaced her? Or what do you think it is in regards to this whole situation that's keeping her in that position? Because Bob Iger, he's fired people for a lot less, you know? So what's going on here? What do you think it is?
Well, you got to approach this from a couple different angles. One is, she might have the same title that she's had ever since she was appointed in her role back in, they bought Lucasfilm in 2012. Yeah. She's had the same title. That doesn't mean she has the same authority that she was given back then. Like I said in that Hollywood Reporter interview, I think it was, he says the buck stops here in regards to the release of Star Wars films. That's really something that we've never really heard Bob Iger doing with any of his studio heads. Usually the studio heads have complete control over the films they release, you know, and without horn when they release it, so forth. But that power, that kind of right of first refusal, has been stripped away from Kathleen Kennedy. So that's kind of interesting. I think the other part of it is, I think Bob Iger, because obviously, whatever move you make, especially when it comes to an acquisition, that might send the stock price down.
True.
So you kind of have to, you can't just fire somebody like a Kathleen Kennedy without having a replacement already set. And you can kind of calm shareholders down. Hey, look, we're going a new direction. We're going a new direction with this person here. Kathleen Kennedy, her role will be changed or reduced or whatever. And I think it's a little bit of how do I phrase this? The devil you know is better than the devil you don't kind of thing. Like, okay, if you have somebody that's a little bit underperforming, is that necessarily better or worse than somebody who could replace them? So I think it's a little bit of, hey, let's kind of keep this show going here just for the meantime, and then we'll kind of reevaluate as time goes on. I think that has something to do with it. So it's just interesting how her power, her authority has been kind of scaled back, whereas Kevin Feige's been pushed way forward, and that kind of tells you what they think between Marvel and Lucasfilm.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Kevin Feige is getting to a point where he's almost like the co-president of the company. I mean, he's expanding so much in regards to he's completely controlling Marvel. He's got even more power now with Marvel, and he's even dipping a little bit into Lucasfilm now.
Yes,
Lucasfilm
that's interesting.
Claims, yeah, I mean, Lucasfilm claims like, oh well, it's only one film. I am not so sure about that, and I don't think necessarily he's gonna replace Kathleen Kennedy. I don't know for sure, but I think Iger is setting him up for some sort of role at Lucasfilm where he's a lot more hands-on in regards to these films. And it's not being publicly stated, probably not to embarrass Kathleen or anything like that, but something's going on with that. It's really weird, a guy like Kevin Feige, who's of his stature within the company, just wanting to go in and do one film. I just find that a little hard to believe.
From what I understand, when the acquisition happened in 2012 with Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, Kevin Feige offered his services to Kathleen Kennedy to help them map out the cinematic franchise going forward. From what I understand, he was told, no, thank you. So now it's very interesting, very interesting to me, looking at, outside looking in, that he's now being brought in here.
Yeah.
That's very, very interesting to me. And again, Ike Perlmutter has been sidelined. Kevin Feige has been given far more control over not only his division but other divisions, within the company. And so I think that one is very, very interesting as far as his movie or his project for Star Wars going forward. I think that one catches my eye, and that's the one that's like, ooh, follow this up, because here's the thing. You might be able to tell lesser creatives no. I don't think you're going to be able to argue with Kevin Feige too much.
Yeah.
It's just, the pedigree's just too long.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the last question I want to ask you before we go. We had a long discussion, a really good discussion about Kathleen Kennedy and everything. And I wanted to ask you, if you could pick one person to run Lucasfilm, who would you pick if you could? If it was up to you, you're Bob Iger. Who do you pick to run Lucasfilm?
Oh, I don't know if I pick one person.
Well, no, that's fine. And if it's a team like we talked about, like a co position, if that's your strategy, then yeah. I mean, how would you go forward?
Well, this is interesting because it's like, well, JJ's out the door. He's got that deal with Warner Brothers right now.
Yeah.
So he can't ask for his services probably. I don't know. I kind of like Jon Favreau. I think he's awesome. He can deal with creatives. He can deal with vision. He can deal with all that kind of stuff. The interesting thing is you kind of need a producer. You kind of need the more general view. And I don't know if Kathleen Kennedy's perfect for that role, but maybe a Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni, honestly. Like, Dave Filoni, his knowledge of the franchise. I mean, I mean, you can see it in Clone Wars, you can see it in Rebels. He understands this. There's a great YouTube video out. It's actually taken from the Blu-ray collection, edition, one of the bonus discs. The video is called George Lucas on the Force Interview, and it's literally George Lucas talking to. It's a story session that they had for Clone Wars, one of the seasons or episodes or whatever. And he talks about the Force, and Dave Filoni's right in that room. I mean, he always calls George Lucas, hey, he's the master, I'm just the apprentice, kind of thing. He just has that understanding for the franchise, for what these things kind of mean to people, and where these characters and these stories should go. And I think honestly, to answer your question, I think you need a little bit of a two-head monster. I think you need somebody who's got great kind of production mindset, great business mindset, and you gotta have somebody who's got a creative stake in the franchise.
Yeah, no, that would be a great approach. I would agree with you on that. I think that with Lucasfilm, you do need a two-pronged approach. I would probably go maybe Kathleen and Favreau. I'm really impressed with. There hasn't been, and I haven't seen Lion King yet, but there hasn't been a movie from Favreau that I've seen that I didn't like. The guy, in my opinion, is a brilliant director. He's a Star Wars nerd. I mean, he is a
total Star Wars nerd, yeah.
And he loves this franchise, and I think he would do remarkable things. And then pair that with Kennedy's, like we talked about, she's a very good businesswoman. She has that sense, that business sense of like that, the overall, like Bob Iger does. Compare that with that, and I think it would be, it would be unstoppable. It would be one of those matches where like you could really, I think that the content would be vastly improved, and also it would also kind of energize the fans in a way, because then you can have Kathleen kind of take a more backseat behind the scenes approach, and have Favreau be the guy who comes up at D23 and gets the crowd riled up like Feige.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
so, because that's a big part of it too, are the fans. And I think Favreau would be good, or Filoni, like you mentioned, Filoni would be the same way, would just light up the fans every convention and get everyone pumped up. Kathleen Kennedy is a Bob Iger. She's very, very business formal, and it's hard to get the crowd worked up like that when you're like that, which is fine. That's her thing. That's her personality. That's the way her style, her approach. But I think in terms of for getting fans energized, I think you need like a Favreau or a Filoni to really get up there and like just get everyone energized,
I think you do. I think you. That's kind of interesting how you say that. I mean, if you saw the latest Comic-Con, people described it as a rock concert when the Marvel panel took place. I mean, it was just electric,
right?
In Hall H. So I think you do. I think you need somebody who's kind of the face and the image. I think you need somebody who's got just a great insight for talent, for vision. Hey, if we want to bring this story to fruition, who do we need? Who's the person that can fulfill this role, who can bring this to a release date. I think you desperately need that right now. I think you need stability, more than anything, and it's going to be interesting going forward. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting couple of months. Rise of Skywalker coming out. See how that does. It just it's an interesting time for Star Wars. But I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't getting a little frustrated with the behind the scenes drama. And I am. A lot of people, accuse me of being overly optimistic with Disney or Star Wars and stuff like that. But I'm getting to the point now, I think, with Lucasfilm where it's frustrating me. You know, we're a couple months out from Rise of Skywalker, and we should be focusing on this movie and getting people energized. And
Absolutely.
and here we are again talking about people leaving. Right? It's like, oh, again, right? It's like
Again.
every single movie. So I'm getting frustrated. I really am getting frustrated, but in grand Star Wars fashion, I do have hope. I do have hope.
You have to have hope, right? I mean, this franchise is just beloved. You have to have hope for it. I do feel they'll figure it out. Like I said, I mean, listen, my frustration goes back all the way to 2012 when they announced that LucasArts was closing. I was like, what? LucasArts? Like, how do you close that down? What? Disney's been trying to get in the video game business for years. You close down LucasArts? So ever since then, I was like, okay, well, let's hold the train up. I want to kind of Marvel. I mean, not in tone, but just kind of a Marvel rate of success for Star Wars. But I had to pump the brakes a little bit. I had to kind of look at it objectively and go, okay, you know, I can't look at it from just one standpoint. I kind of have to look at it back, and like you said, I've become increasingly more frustrated as this has gone on. But like you said, I have hope. They will figure it out. I have hope. I really do.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it will work itself out. It's just going to be, it's going to be a lot of ups and downs, I think, in the meantime. So we'll have to see what happens. But I want to thank you again for coming on. It was a lot of fun as usual, a lot of great insight. We'll definitely do some park talk once the parks start, ramping up with some rise of resistance and things like that. But
Sparks.
Yes. So, but thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. I really do enjoy our time. Thank you very much for having me.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you.